I'm Robert Mitchell, I'm 68 years old, and that happened exactly 6 months ago. Listen to this story until the end, and tell me what you would have done in my place. Also, let me know what part touched your heart the most, and what city you're listening from. I'm sitting here in my study, looking at a photo of Sarah when she was 7 years old. She's wearing that pink dress her mother bought her for her birthday, smiling with 2 missing front teeth. That little girl used to run to me every day when I came home from work, jumping into my arms and saying, "Daddy, I missed you so much." Now she's 35 years old, married to a man who never liked me, and she just told me I'm not her father anymore. But here's what Sarah doesn't know. Here's what she's about to find out the hard way. Sometimes when you push away the people who love you most, life has a funny way of teaching you what you've lost. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one fight. This story goes back years to when Sarah started changing, when she started believing that money was more important than family, when she started treating me like I was just some old man who didn't understand the modern world. It all started 3 years ago, when Sarah married David. David comes from what he calls new money. His family made their fortune in tech, and from the day I met him, he made it clear that he thought I was beneath them. I'm a retired carpenter. I built houses with my hands for 40 years. I saved every penny I could to give Sarah a good life after her mother died when Sarah was 12. But David saw me as an embarrassment. At their wedding, he actually suggested I shouldn't give a speech because, and I quote, "Robert's stories about construction work might not resonate with our guests." Sarah said nothing. She just looked at me with apologetic eyes and asked if I'd mind skipping the speech just this once. That should have been my first warning sign. But I loved my daughter, so I stayed quiet. I sat at the back table with my brother Tom and watched my little girl marry a man who was already trying to erase me from her life. After the wedding, the visits became less frequent. Sarah used to come by every Sunday for dinner. We'd sit on the porch and I'd tell her stories about her mother, about the house I built for them, about the dreams we had. But after David, Sunday dinners became once a month, then once every few months, then only on holidays. And when she did visit, David always came with her. He'd sit in my living room checking his phone, making comments about how quaint my house was, how I should really upgrade to a modern place. He'd look at the furniture I built with my own hands like it was junk from a thrift store. Sarah started changing too. She began talking about investments and portfolios and networking opportunities. She'd look around my house, the house where she grew up, where her mother and I raised her with love, and I could see disappointment in her eyes. One day, about 2 years ago, she came to visit alone. David was on a business trip. I thought maybe we could have one of our old conversations like when she was young. But instead she sat me down and said, "Dad, David and I have been talking. We think you should consider selling this house." I was confused. Why would I sell my house, sweetheart? Because it's too big for one person. Because the neighborhood isn't what it used to be. Because you could use the money to move somewhere nice, maybe one of those senior communities. Senior communities. Like I was some old man who needed to be put away. "Sarah, this is my home. This is where you grew up. This is where your mother and I built our life together." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "Dad, you're being sentimental. This house is just sitting here losing value. You could sell it, invest the money, and live comfortably somewhere more appropriate for your age. More appropriate for my age. My own daughter was telling me I was too old for my own home. What if I don't want to sell? Then you're being stubborn and impractical. David says holding on to old things is what keeps people poor," David says. Everything was David says now. David says this, David says that. Like my daughter couldn't think for herself anymore. That conversation ended badly. Sarah left frustrated and I was hurt. But I thought it would blow over. I thought she'd remember who raised her, who loved her, who sacrificed everything to give her a good life. I was wrong. The visits became even less frequent after that. When Sarah did come by, she'd spend the whole time pointing out things that needed to be updated or modernized. She'd take pictures of my furniture, my decorations, my books, and I'd catch her showing them to David later, both of them shaking their heads. Then came the incident with my will. I had always planned to leave everything to Sarah, the house, my savings, everything. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. I'd worked hard my whole life to make sure my daughter would be taken care of. But 6 months ago, I decided to update my will. I wanted to make sure everything was in order, that there wouldn't be any legal problems when I'm gone. So I called Sarah and asked her to come with me to the lawyer's office. "Why do you need me there?" she asked. "Because you're my beneficiary. I want you to understand everything, to know what you'll inherit." There was a pause. Then she said something that shocked me. "Dad, David and I have been talking about this. We think you should consider donating most of your estate to charity." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What?" "Well, we're doing fine financially. We don't really need an inheritance, and David says it would be better for tax purposes if you donated the money instead of leaving it to family," David says. Again. "Sarah, this money, this house, everything I have, I worked for it so I could leave it to you. So you'd have security, so you'd remember that your father loved you." "Dad, that's sweet, but it's not practical. Besides, we're planning to move to California next year. David got offered a position there. We won't even be here to take care of a house." California. She was moving to California and hadn't even told me. "When were you planning to mention that you're moving across the country?" "I'm telling you now. Look, Dad, I know this is hard for you to understand, but David and I have our own life to build. We can't keep being tied down by old obligations." Old obligations. That's what I had become to my daughter. An old obligation. The lawyer's appointment was a disaster. Sarah spent the whole time agreeing with David's suggestions about charitable donations and tax strategies. She barely looked at me. When the lawyer asked if she had any questions about inheriting the house, she said, "Actually, we'd prefer if that went to charity too." I sat there listening to my daughter give away her inheritance like it meant nothing to her. Like the 40 years I spent working to build something for her meant nothing. That night I called my brother Tom. Tom is 5 years younger than me, and he's always been the smart one in the family. He listened to everything I told him, and then he said something that changed everything. "Robert, Sarah is taking you for granted, because you've never let her face any consequences. You've always been there to catch her when she falls, to give her whatever she needs. She doesn't value you because she's never had to live without you." "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm saying maybe it's time Sarah learned what life looks like without her father's support." I thought about that conversation for weeks. Tom was right. I had always been there for Sarah. When she wanted to go to college, I paid for it. When she needed a car, I bought it. When she wanted to start her own business after college, I gave her the money. When the business failed, I never asked for the money back. I had spent my whole life making sure Sarah never had to struggle, never had to want for anything. And now she was treating me like I was worthless. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to take Tom's advice. I decided to let Sarah see what life looked like without me. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 3 weeks after the lawyer's appointment, Sarah called me, but it wasn't a social call. "Dad, I need to ask you a favor." "What kind of favor?" "David's company is going through some restructuring. His position got eliminated, and we're having some cash flow problems. We were wondering if you could help us out with a loan." A loan? After she had just spent an hour at the lawyer's office giving away my money to charity, now she needed a loan. "How much are you talking about?" $50,000. "Just until David finds something new. We'll pay you back with interest." $50,000. That was almost half of my savings. "Sarah, that's a lot of money." "I know, Dad, but we're really in a bind here. The mortgage payment is due, and we've got credit card debt from the wedding. David's confident he'll find something soon, but we just need to get through the next few months." I could hear the desperation in her voice. For the first time in years, Sarah needed me. Really needed me. And that's when I said something that surprised both of us. "No." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Sarah. I'm not going to lend you $50,000. "But Dad, we're family. Family helps family." "Funny. You didn't seem to think we were family when you were giving away my inheritance to charity." "That's different. That was about being practical. And this is about being practical too. You and David have made it very clear that you don't need anything from me. You're successful, independent, modern people who don't want to be tied down by old obligations. So handle this like the successful, independent people you are." "Dad, you're being ridiculous. This is an emergency." "No, Sarah, this is life. This is what happens when you push away the people who love you." She hung up on me. 2 days later, she showed up at my house. She was angry, angrier than I'd seen her since she was a teenager. Dad, what is wrong with you? David and I are in serious trouble and you're acting like a child. I'm acting like a man who's tired of being taken for granted. Taken for granted? Dad, I love you. Do you, Sarah? Because for the past 3 years you've treated me like an embarrassment. You've listened to your husband insult me in my own home. You've tried to get me to sell the house your mother and I built together. You've given away your inheritance like it means nothing to you. And now when you need money, suddenly I'm family again. Sarah's face went red. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 40 years sacrificing for a daughter who thinks I'm too old and too poor to be part of her new life. Dad, you don't understand. David and I are trying to build something. We have goals, ambitions. We can't be held back by the past. The past? Sarah, I am your father. I'm not the past. I'm the man who raised you, who loved you, who worked 2 jobs to pay for your college so you wouldn't have student loans. I'm the man who held you when you cried about boys, who taught you to drive, who walked you down the aisle at your wedding. I know that, Dad, but things are different now. Yes, they are different. You're different. You've become someone I don't recognize. That's when she exploded. You know what, Dad, maybe you're right. Maybe I have changed. Maybe I've grown up and realized that clinging to old houses and old furniture and old ways of thinking isn't going to get me anywhere in life. Maybe I've realized that successful people don't let sentiment hold them back. And maybe I've realized that my daughter has become someone who values money more than family. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you came to visit me just because you wanted to see me? When's the last time you asked how I was doing, how I was feeling, whether I was lonely in this big house by myself? When's the last time you treated me like a father instead of like an ATM? Sarah stared at me, and I could see that my words had hit home. But instead of apologizing, instead of recognizing what she'd become, she doubled down. You know what, Dad? You're right. I don't come to visit you just to chat. I don't ask about your feelings. You want to know why? Because every time I come here, you make me feel guilty. Guilty for being successful. Guilty for wanting more than this little house in this little neighborhood. Guilty for not being content to live like it's still 1985. Sarah, I never wanted you to feel guilty for being successful. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. But I wanted you to remember where you came from, to remember the people who helped you get there. Well, maybe I don't want to remember. Maybe I want to focus on the future instead of being dragged down by the past. And that's when she said it, the words that changed everything between us. You know what, Dad? If you're not going to help us when we need it, if you're going to be petty and vindictive, then maybe David is right. Maybe you're not the kind of father I need in my life. I felt like she had punched me in the stomach. What did you just say? I said, maybe David is right. Maybe I need to stop letting you hold me back. Hold you back? Sarah, how have I ever held you back? By making me feel guilty every time I try to move forward. By acting like wanting a better life is somehow betraying you. By being so stuck in the past that you can't see that the world has changed. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised, this person I had loved more than my own life, and I realized that Tom was right. She had never learned to value what she had because she had never lost it. Sarah, I said quietly, I think you should leave. Fine, but don't expect me to come crawling back when you change your mind about the loan. I won't change my mind. She headed toward the door, then turned back. And don't expect me to keep pretending that we have some great father-daughter relationship when you clearly don't care about my happiness. I care about your happiness, Sarah, but I also care about your character, and right now, I don't like what you've become. That's when she screamed it. You're no father to me. I never want to see you again. And she slammed the door so hard that the picture of her mother fell off the wall and the glass shattered. I stood there in my living room, looking at the broken glass, and I did something that surprised me. I smiled. I smiled because I realized that for the first time in 3 years, I had stood up for myself. For the first time in 3 years, I had refused to let Sarah and David treat me like I was worthless. And I smiled because I knew something that Sarah didn't know yet. I knew that life was about to teach her some very hard lessons about what really matters. The first lesson came 2 weeks later. I was working in my garden when my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came over. Mrs. Patterson is a sweet lady in her 70s who's lived next door for 20 years. She's also a bit of a gossip, which usually annoys me, but that day I was grateful for it. Robert, she said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is Sarah okay? What do you mean? Well, I saw her at the grocery store yesterday, and she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. And she was using coupons for everything, even the store brand items. Sarah using coupons. Sarah, who used to make fun of people who clipped coupons, calling it penny-pinching behavior for people who don't understand money management. Did she say anything to you? She seemed embarrassed to see me. She kept the conversation short, but I could tell something was wrong. Robert, you two didn't have a falling out, did you? I didn't answer directly. Mrs. Patterson, sometimes people need to learn lessons the hard way. She nodded like she understood. My daughter went through something similar when she was in her 30s. Thought she knew everything. Thought her old mother was just a burden. It took her losing her job and her husband leaving her before she realized that family is all you really have in the end. What happened? She came back, apologized. We worked things out. But it took her hitting rock bottom before she remembered who loved her. That conversation stayed with me. I wondered if Sarah was starting to hit her own rock bottom. I found out the answer a week later when Tom called me. Robert, I just heard something interesting from my friend Mike. You remember Mike? He works at the bank downtown. Yeah, what about him? He told me that David applied for a personal loan last week, a big one, $50,000, the same amount Sarah had asked me for. Did he get it? Nope. Turns out David's credit isn't as good as he pretends. He's got maxed out credit cards, missed payments, the whole mess. The bank wouldn't touch him. I felt a mix of satisfaction and concern. Satisfaction because it meant David wasn't the financial genius he pretended to be. Concern because it meant Sarah was in real trouble. Tom, do you think I should... No, Robert, don't you dare. You told me yourself that Sarah needs to learn this lesson. If you bail her out now, she'll never respect you. Tom was right, but it wasn't easy. Sarah was still my daughter, and knowing she was struggling was hard. But I stuck to my decision, and life kept teaching Sarah lessons. The next lesson came a month later. I was at the hardware store buying supplies for a project when I ran into David's brother, Mark. Mark is nothing like David. He's a decent guy who works as a mechanic and has always been polite to me. Hey, Mr. Mitchell, he said. How are you doing? I'm fine, Mark. How's your family? Good, good. Listen, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I heard about the situation with David and Sarah. What situation? Mark looked uncomfortable. The money problems. David's been calling everyone in the family asking for loans. He even asked my dad for $20,000. Did your father give it to him? Hell no, my dad worked construction his whole life just like you. He doesn't have that kind of money lying around. But David got pretty nasty when Dad said no. Started talking about how the family doesn't support each other, how he's always been looked down on. I'm sorry to hear that. Mr. Mitchell, can I tell you something? David's always been like this. Even when we were kids, he thought he was better than everyone else. When he started making good money, it got worse. He started treating the whole family like we were beneath him. Mark paused, then continued. But here's the thing. David's not as successful as he pretends to be. He spends money he doesn't have to look rich. The fancy car leased, the expensive clothes, credit cards, that big wedding, they're still paying for it. This was news to me. Sarah had always talked about how well David was doing, how smart he was with money. Mark, why are you telling me this? Because Sarah's a good person and she doesn't deserve what's happening to her. David's dragging her down with his fake lifestyle and she doesn't even realize it. What do you mean? I mean, David convinced Sarah to quit her job last year, said they didn't need her income, that it was better for her to focus on networking and building connections. But really, he just wanted a wife who could play the part of a successful man's spouse. Sarah had quit her job? She hadn't told me that. So now they have no income? David's been doing some consulting work, but it's not steady, and it's not nearly enough to cover their expenses. They're living off credit cards and loans. I left the hardware store with a lot to think about. Sarah wasn't just struggling financially. She was trapped in a lifestyle that was built on lies. But I still didn't reach out to her. Tom was right. Sarah needed to learn these lessons on her own. The next lesson came 2 months later, and it was the hardest one yet. I was having dinner at Tom's house when his wife Linda mentioned something she'd heard at her book club. Robert, I hope this doesn't upset you, but one of the ladies in my book club lives in Sarah's neighborhood. She said there's been some drama over there. What kind of drama? Apparently, Sarah and David had a huge fight in their driveway last week. loud enough that the neighbors could hear everything. My stomach dropped. What were they fighting about? Money. The woman said David was screaming at Sarah about her family, about how her father was selfish and useless. He said some terrible things, Robert. Like what? Linda looked uncomfortable. He said that Sarah's father was a loser who lived in a dump, and that Sarah was stupid for thinking you'd ever help them. He said Sarah needed to stop being sentimental about family and start thinking practically. I felt anger rising in my chest. David was blaming me for their problems, and he was taking it out on Sarah. What did Sarah say? That's the sad part. The neighbor said Sarah was crying, trying to defend you. She said you were a good man who had worked hard his whole life. But David just got angrier. He said if Sarah wanted to stay married to him, she needed to choose between him and her family. Choose between him and her family. David was making Sarah choose. Did she choose? I don't know, Robert. But the neighbor said Sarah looked broken, like she didn't know what to do. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah, about the little girl who used to run to me when she was scared, who used to tell me I was her hero. Now she was trapped in a marriage with a man who was making her choose between her husband and her father. Part of me wanted to call her, to tell her she could come home, that I'd help her figure things out. But Tom's voice kept echoing in my head. If you bail her out now, she'll never respect you. So I waited. And life kept teaching Sarah lessons. The biggest lesson came 3 months later, and it came from an unexpected source. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Sarah's best friend from college, Jennifer. Jennifer and Sarah had been inseparable in school, but I hadn't seen her in years. Mr. Mitchell, how are you? I'm doing well, Jennifer. How are you? I'm good. Listen, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you talked to Sarah lately? Not in a while. Why? Jennifer looked around like she was making sure no one could hear us. Because I'm worried about her. Really worried. What's going on? She called me last week crying. She said David left her. My heart stopped. He left her? Yeah. Apparently he got a job offer in California, but it was for way less money than he was making before. Sarah suggested they take it anyway, start fresh, maybe live more simply. But David said he wasn't going to downgrade his lifestyle for anyone. So he took the job alone. No, that's the crazy part. He turned down the job, said he'd rather stay here and keep looking for something that paid what he was worth. But then he told Sarah that he couldn't handle the stress of their financial problems anymore. He said he needed space to figure things out. Where is he now? He moved in with some friend, left Sarah alone in that big house with all the bills and no income. I felt sick. Sarah was alone, broke, and abandoned by the man she'd chosen over her family. How is she handling it? Not well. She's embarrassed, scared, angry. She keeps saying she doesn't know how everything went so wrong so fast. Jennifer paused, then looked at me directly. Mr. Mitchell, I know it's not my place to say this, but Sarah needs her family right now. She's too proud to ask for help, but she's drowning. Jennifer, Sarah made it very clear that she didn't want me in her life. She was wrong, and I think she knows that now, but she doesn't know how to fix it. I thanked Jennifer and left the store, but I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd told me. Sarah was alone and struggling, and part of me felt guilty for not reaching out. But another part of me remembered the last conversation we'd had, remembered her screaming that I wasn't her father, remembered years of being treated like an embarrassment. I decided to wait a little longer. If Sarah really had learned her lesson, she would reach out to me. 2 weeks later, she did. I was working in my garage when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out and saw Sarah's car, but it took me a moment to recognize her. She looked thin, tired, older than her 35 years. She sat in the car for several minutes before getting out, like she was gathering courage. When she finally came to the door, she looked like she'd been crying. "Hi, Dad." "Hello, Sarah." We stood there for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let her into the house. She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time in years. Her eyes lingered on the furniture I'd built, the pictures on the walls, the simple decorations that she'd once criticized. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. You were right. About everything. About David. About money. About what really matters." She sat down on the couch, the same couch where she'd told me I should sell my house, where she'd given away her inheritance. "David left me. I heard." "You heard?" "Small town, Sarah. Word gets around." She nodded, looking embarrassed. I guess everyone knows what a mess I've made of my life. People know you're going through a hard time. That's different. Sarah started crying then, really crying, like she hadn't cried since she was a child. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything I said, everything I did. I'm sorry for choosing David over you, for treating you like you didn't matter, for being so stupid and selfish. I sat down next to her, and for the first time in months I felt like I was looking at my daughter again, not the stranger she'd become. Sarah, what happened? How did things get so bad so fast? It wasn't fast, Dad. It was slow. David spent 3 years convincing me that I was better than this house, better than this neighborhood, better than you. He made me believe that love and family were just sentimental nonsense that held successful people back. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think I was special, that I deserved more than what I grew up with. You do deserve good things, Sarah. I always wanted you to have a good life. But I had a good life, Dad. I had a father who loved me, who worked hard to give me everything I needed. I had a home full of memories and love. I had security and family and people who cared about me. But David convinced me that none of that mattered if I didn't have money and status. Sarah looked around the room again. Do you know what I realized when David left? I realized that this house, this simple little house that I was so embarrassed by, is the only place that ever felt like home. All those fancy restaurants David took me to, all those expensive parties we went to, all those important people we tried to impress, none of it ever felt real. What feels real to you now? This, sitting here with you, being in the place where Mom used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, where you taught me to ride a bike in the backyard, where we used to watch movies together on Friday nights. I felt my own eyes getting wet. This was the daughter I remembered, the girl who used to value love over money. Sarah, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I was angry, even when I refused to help you, I never stopped being your father. I know, Dad. And I know why you didn't help me. You were trying to teach me something I needed to learn. What did you learn? I learned that family isn't something you can take for granted. I learned that the people who love you aren't holding you back. They're holding you up. I learned that money and status and all the things David thought were important don't mean anything if you don't have people who care about you. Sarah took my hand. Dad, I learned that I had everything I needed right here, and I threw it away because I thought I deserved better. But there is no better than being loved. We sat there holding hands, and I felt like I had my daughter back. Sarah, what are you going to do now? I don't know. David cleaned out our bank accounts before he left. I can't afford the house payment. I don't have a job. I don't even have a credit card that isn't maxed out. She looked at me with hope and fear in her eyes. Dad, I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've done, but can I come home, just until I figure things out? I looked at my daughter, this woman who had hurt me so deeply, who had chosen money over family, who had screamed that I wasn't her father. And I realized that Tom was wrong about one thing. Sometimes love means giving people second chances, even when they don't deserve them. Sarah, this is your home. It always has been. You can stay as long as you need to. She broke down crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. Thank you, Dad. I promise I'll get back on my feet. I'll find a job. I'll pay you back for everything. Sarah, stop. You don't owe me anything. You're my daughter. This is what family does. That night, Sarah moved back into her old room. It was strange having her in the house again, but it was also wonderful. For the first time in 3 years, the house felt alive. Over the next few weeks, I watched Sarah slowly become herself again. She started looking for work, but she also started doing things she hadn't done in years. She cooked dinner for us. She worked in the garden with me. She sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about her mother, about memories from when she was young. One evening, about a month after she'd moved back in, we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when she said something that surprised me. Dad, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. What is it? When I asked you for that loan when I was so desperate and scared, did you know that helping me would have been the wrong thing to do? I thought about it. I knew that you needed to learn some lessons. I knew that I had spent your whole life protecting you from consequences and that it hadn't helped you become a strong person. But did you know how bad things would get? Did you know David would leave me? No, Sarah, I didn't know it would go that far. If I had known you'd end up alone and broke, I might have made a different choice." She nodded. "I'm glad you didn't know. Because if you had helped me then, I would have learned that I could treat you badly and still get what I wanted when I needed it. I would have learned that family is just a safety net for when your real life falls apart." "And what did you learn instead?" "I learned that family is your real life, everything else is just decoration." Sarah got a job 2 weeks later. It wasn't a glamorous job, just working as an administrative assistant at a local company, but she was proud of it. She came home every day excited to tell me about her work, about the people she was meeting, about the projects she was working on. It reminded me of when she was young and would come home from school, bursting with stories about her day. 3 months after Sarah moved back home, something unexpected happened. David called. I answered the phone, and his voice was different than I remembered, less arrogant, more desperate. "Mr. Mitchell, this is David. Is Sarah there?" "She's at work." "What do you want, David?" "I want to talk to her. I want to work things out." "Work what out? You left her with nothing and disappeared." I know I messed up, but I've been thinking and I realize I made a mistake. Sarah and I belong together." "David, what's really going on? Why are you calling now?" There was a pause. "The job market is tough right now. I haven't found anything that pays what I'm worth, and living alone is expensive. I think Sarah and I could help each other out." Help each other out. He wanted Sarah back because he needed her, not because he loved her. "David, I don't think Sarah is interested in helping you out anymore. Look, Mr. Mitchell, I know we've had our differences, but Sarah loves me. We have a history together. We can make this work." "You're right, David. You do have a history together. A history of you treating her badly and making her choose between you and her family. I was under a lot of stress. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Do they? Because the things you said seemed pretty clear to me. When Sarah came home that evening, I told her about David's call. Her reaction surprised me. "He wants me back?" That's what he said. "But Sarah, I think you should know that he sounded desperate. I don't think this is about love." Sarah sat down at the kitchen table where we'd been eating dinner together every night for months. "Dad, can I tell you something? 6 months ago, if David had called and said he wanted me back, I would have gone running. I would have convinced myself that our problems were just temporary, that we could work things out. And now I realize that I don't want to work things out. I don't want to go back to pretending that money and status matter more than love and family. I don't want to go back to being ashamed of where I come from." She looked around the kitchen, at the simple table and chairs, at the pictures on the refrigerator, at the life we'd built together. "Dad, I'm happier now than I was when I was married to David. I'm happier living in this little house, working at a regular job, eating dinner with my father every night, than I ever was trying to impress people who didn't really care about me." "Are you sure about that, Sarah?" "I'm sure. David taught me to want things that don't matter. You taught me to value things that do." Sarah called David that night and told him she wasn't interested in getting back together. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I heard enough to know that David didn't take it well. He tried to convince her that she was making a mistake, that she was throwing away her chance at a good life. But Sarah held firm. She told him that she already had a good life, and it didn't include him. After she hung up, she came and found me in the living room. "Dad, I want to ask you something." "What is it?" "I want to know if you'd be okay with me staying here permanently. Not just until I get back on my feet, but for good." I was surprised. "Sarah, you're a young woman. Don't you want your own place, your own independence?" "I want to be where I'm loved, and where I can love someone back. I want to be where I belong." She sat down next to me on the couch. "Dad, I spent 3 years trying to build a life that looked impressive from the outside, but it was empty inside. This house, this life with you, it might not look like much to other people, but it's real. It's full of love and history and meaning. What about dating? What about finding someone new? If I meet someone who values family the way I do now, someone who sees this house and this life as a blessing instead of an embarrassment, then maybe we'll talk about the future. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not anymore." Sarah stayed, and over the next year, our relationship became stronger than it had ever been. We weren't just father and daughter anymore. We were friends, companions, partners in building a life together. Sarah got promoted at her job. She started taking classes at the community college. She made new friends, people who valued character over money. She began dating a man named Tom, a teacher who thought it was wonderful that she lived with her father and took care of him. One evening, almost exactly a year after Sarah had moved back home, we were sitting on the porch when she said something that made me realize how much she had changed. "Dad, I got a call from Jennifer today. She told me that David got married. How do you feel about that?" "Happy for him, I guess. I hope he's learned to treat his new wife better than he treated me." "Do you miss him at all?" Sarah thought about it. "I miss the idea of him. I miss the dream of having a successful husband and a glamorous life. But I don't miss the reality of being married to someone who was ashamed of my family." She looked at me. "Dad, can I tell you something I've never told you before?" "Of course. The day I screamed at you, the day I said you weren't my father, I knew I was wrong even as I was saying it. But I was so angry, so frustrated, so scared about money that I wanted to hurt you the way I was hurting. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to know that even at my worst moment, even when I was saying terrible things, part of me knew that you were the best father I could have asked for. Part of me knew that I was throwing away the most important relationship in my life. Sarah, we all say things we don't mean when we're scared. But I did mean it, Dad. In that moment, I meant it. I was so caught up in David's world, so convinced that money and status were more important than love, that I really believed you weren't the kind of father I needed." She started crying. "And that's what scares me the most. Not that I said it, but that I believed it. I actually believed that a man who had loved me and sacrificed for me my whole life wasn't good enough because he didn't have enough money." I put my arm around her. "Sarah, what matters is that you learned from it. What matters is that you're here now. Dad, I want to make you a promise." "What kind of promise?" "I promise that I will never again value money over family. I promise that I will never again be ashamed of where I come from, and I promise that I will never again take your love for granted." "Sarah, you don't need to make promises. You've already shown me that you've learned these lessons." "I need to say it out loud, Dad. I need to hear myself make this commitment." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd raised my daughter, where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd played with friends, where she'd grown up believing that love was more important than money. Now she was back, and she believed it again. 2 years later, Sarah married Tom, the teacher. It was a small wedding in our backyard, with just family and close friends. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, which I'd kept in the closet all these years. When it came time for me to walk her down the aisle, she stopped and looked at me. "Dad, thank you." "For what?" "For loving me enough to let me fall, for loving me enough to let me learn, for loving me enough to take me back when I finally came to my senses." "Sarah, that's what fathers do." "No, Dad, that's what good fathers do, and you're the best father I could have asked for." As I walked my daughter down the aisle, I thought about everything we'd been through. The fights, the separation, the hard lessons, the reconciliation. It had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Sarah needed to learn that family isn't something you can take for granted. She needed to learn that love is more valuable than money. She needed to learn that the people who truly care about you aren't holding you back, they're holding you up. And I needed to learn that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. Now, 3 years later, Sarah and Tom live in the house next door, which they bought from Mrs. Patterson when she moved to Florida. Every Sunday we have dinner together. Every holiday we celebrate as a family. Every day I'm reminded of how lucky I am to have a daughter who values love over money. Sarah often tells people about the time she lost her way, about how she almost threw away the most important relationship in her life for money and status. She tells them about the hard lessons she learned, about the father who loved her enough to let her fall and wise enough to be there when she was ready to get back up. And when people ask me about it, when they ask how I had the strength to turn away my own daughter when she needed help, I tell them this: sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's bad choices. Sometimes you have to let people hit bottom before they can learn to climb back up. But there's more to this story. There's something I haven't told you yet, something that happened just last month that made me realize how much Sarah has truly changed. Last month, Sarah came to me with news that shocked me. She was pregnant. "Dad," she said, sitting in the same spot on the couch where she'd once told me to sell my house, "Tom and I are going to have a baby." I was overjoyed, of course. The thought of being a grandfather, of having a little one running around the house again, filled me with happiness. But then Sarah said something that made me realize how completely she had transformed. "Dad, I want to ask you something important. Tom and I have been talking, and we want to know if you'd consider moving in with us when the baby comes." I was confused. "Move in with you? Sarah, you live right next door. I'm already close enough to help with the baby." "No, Dad. You don't understand. We want you to live with us. We want our child to grow up in a house with their grandfather. We want them to have what I had when I was little, before I was stupid enough to think it wasn't valuable." She took my hand. "Dad, I want my child to learn from you the way I should have kept learning from you. I want them to see how a real man treats his family, how hard work and love are more important than money and status." I was speechless. This was the same daughter who had once been embarrassed by my simple house, who had wanted me to move to a senior community. "Sarah, are you sure about this? You and Tom are newlyweds. You should have your own space." "Dad, Tom and I have talked about this a lot." He agrees with me. "We don't want to raise our child the way David would have wanted to raise children. We don't want them to think that family is something you outgrow, or that love is less important than success." She paused, then continued. "We want to raise them the way you raised me before I lost my way. We want them to grow up knowing their grandfather, learning from him, understanding that family is the most precious thing in the world." Tom came over that evening to talk to me about their proposal. He's a good man, Tom. He's nothing like David. He's humble, kind, and he genuinely loves Sarah for who she really is, not for who she could pretend to be. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, "I hope you don't think this is strange, but I've always wanted to live in a house with multiple generations. My grandparents died when I was young, and I always felt like I missed out on something important." "What do you mean?" "I mean the wisdom that comes from older generations, the stories, the perspective, the understanding of what really matters in life. Sarah has told me so much about the lessons you taught her, about the values you instilled in her. I want our children to have that." Tom looked around my living room at the furniture I'd built, at the pictures on the walls, at the simple but meaningful life I'd created. "Mr. Mitchell, Sarah told me about the time she wanted you to sell this house, about how she was embarrassed by it. But when I look around here, I don't see something to be embarrassed by. I see a home built with love, filled with memories, grounded in real values." "Thank you, Tom. That means a lot to me. Sir, I want our children to grow up in a place like this. Not necessarily this exact house, but a place where love matters more than money, where family comes first, where they learn that the most important things in life can't be bought." We talked for hours that night, Tom and Sarah and I. We talked about how we could combine our households, about how we could raise children together, about how we could build a life that honored both tradition and progress. In the end, we decided that they would sell their house and move back into my house with me. It's big enough for all of us, and it's the house where Sarah grew up, where her mother and I built our life together. But more than that, it's a house built on the foundation of real values, and that's what Sarah wants for her children. The moving day was emotional for all of us. As we carried boxes and furniture, as we rearranged rooms and made space for everyone, I couldn't help but think about how different this was from 3 years ago when Sarah was trying to convince me to sell this place. Now she was moving back in, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, not because she was broke and desperate, but because she had learned what really mattered. That night, after everything was moved in and organized, we sat on the porch together, the three of us. Sarah was already showing just a little, and she had her hand on her belly. "Dad," she said, "I want to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I want to tell you about the kind of grandparent I hope you'll be." I was curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I hope you'll be exactly the kind of grandparent you were a father. I hope you'll teach our children to work with their hands, to value honest work, to understand that love is more important than money." She paused, then continued. "But I also hope you'll do something you couldn't do with me." "What's that?" "I hope you'll let them fail sometimes. I hope you'll let them learn hard lessons when they need to. I hope you won't protect them from consequences the way you protected me." I was surprised. "Sarah, I thought you understood why I did that. I thought you knew I was trying to help you." "I do understand, Dad, and I'm grateful for everything you did for me. But I also understand now that protecting me from every consequence made me weak. It made me think I could treat people badly and still get what I wanted." Tom nodded in agreement. "We've talked about this a lot. We want to raise children who are strong, who understand that actions have consequences, who value the people who love them. Sarah looked at me directly. Dad, I want you to promise me something. What? I want you to promise that if our children ever treat you the way I treated you, you'll do exactly what you did with me. I want you to let them learn the hard way that family is precious. Sarah, I hope it never comes to that. So do I, Dad. But if it does, I want you to know that Tom and I will support you. We won't undermine you the way David undermined you. We'll stand with you, even if it means watching our children struggle. This conversation made me realize something profound. Sarah hadn't just learned to value family again. She had learned to value the hard lessons that make people strong. She had learned that love sometimes means letting people face consequences. 6 months later, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Grace, after Sarah's mother. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, looking into her tiny face, I felt a joy I hadn't experienced since Sarah was born. But I also felt a responsibility. This little girl would grow up in a house with 3 adults who were committed to teaching her real values, to showing her that love and family are more important than money and status. As Grace grew from a baby into a toddler, I watched Sarah and Tom parent her with wisdom I wish I had possessed when Sarah was young. They loved her completely, but they also set boundaries. They gave her everything she needed, but not everything she wanted. They taught her to say please and thank you, to respect her elders, to understand that the world didn't revolve around her. When Grace was 2 years old, something happened that tested all of us. Grace had been asking for an expensive toy she'd seen on television. Sarah and Tom had told her no, that it was too expensive and that she had plenty of toys already. But Grace kept asking, kept demanding, kept throwing tantrums when she didn't get her way. One day I was watching Grace while Sarah and Tom were at work. Grace started having a meltdown about the toy, screaming and crying and telling me that her parents were mean. For a moment, I was tempted to give in. I was tempted to buy her the toy, to make her happy, to be the grandfather who gave her everything she wanted. But then I remembered my conversation with Sarah, remembered her asking me to let Grace learn hard lessons when she needed to. So instead of giving in, I sat Grace down and had a conversation with her. Grace, I said, do you know why Mommy and Daddy said no to that toy? Because they're mean, she said, still crying. No, sweetheart, because they love you. That doesn't make sense, Grandpa. Grace, people who love you don't give you everything you want. They give you what you need. And what you need is to learn that you can't have everything just because you want it. I picked her up and sat her on my lap. Grace, do you know what the most important things in life are? She shook her head, still sniffling. The most important things are the people who love you. Your mommy and daddy and me and all the family and friends who care about you. Toys are fun, but they're not important. People are important. Grace looked at me with her big eyes. But I really want that toy, Grandpa. I know you do, sweetheart, but wanting something doesn't mean you should get it. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is not getting what we want, because it teaches us to be grateful for what we have. I showed her around the house, pointing out all the toys she already had, all the books, all the things that Sarah and Tom had provided for her. Grace, look at all these wonderful things you have. Look at this beautiful house, this warm bed, all these toys. Most children in the world don't have half of what you have. She looked around, really looked, maybe for the first time. You're right, Grandpa. I do have a lot of stuff. You have more than stuff, Grace. You have people who love you so much that they work hard every day to take care of you. That's worth more than any toy. That evening, when Sarah and Tom came home, Grace ran to them and hugged them. Mommy, Daddy, I'm sorry I was mean about the toy. Grandpa taught me that I have everything I need because I have you. Sarah looked at me over Grace's head, and I could see tears in her eyes. She mouthed the words, thank you. Later that night, after Grace was in bed, Sarah came to talk to me. Dad, thank you for what you did today. Tom and I heard about the conversation you had with Grace. I just did what you asked me to do. I let her learn a lesson instead of giving her what she wanted. Dad, do you know what this means to me? Do you know how it feels to see you teaching my daughter the same values you tried to teach me? I could see that she was getting emotional. Sarah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Dad. Everything's right. For the first time in my life, I feel like we're all on the same team. You and me and Tom, all working together to raise Grace with real values. She sat down next to me. Dad, when I was growing up, I thought you were being mean when you tried to teach me lessons. I thought you didn't understand the modern world, but now I see that you were trying to give me something more valuable than money or status. You were trying to give me character, and now you're giving that to Grace. We're giving that to Grace, Dad. All three of us, together. As Grace grew older, she became a joy to watch. She was curious, kind, respectful, and grateful. She loved spending time with all of us, but she especially loved the stories I told her about her grandmother, about the old days, about the importance of family. When Grace was 4, Sarah had another baby, a boy they named Robert after me. Holding my grandson, seeing my name carried forward to another generation, was one of the proudest moments of my life. But what made me even prouder was seeing how Sarah and Tom continued to parent with wisdom and strength. They loved their children completely, but they also taught them responsibility, gratitude, and respect. One day, when Grace was 5 and little Robert was 1, we were all sitting on the porch when Grace asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Grandpa, why do you live with us instead of in your own house?" Sarah started to answer, but I held up my hand. I wanted to answer this myself. "Grace, I live with you because family is the most important thing in the world. When people love each other, they want to be together. But don't you want your own space? Grace, I had my own space for a while when your mommy was grown up and living somewhere else. And you know what I learned?" "What?" "I learned that having your own space isn't as good as being with the people you love." Grace thought about this. "So you choose to live with us?" "I choose to live with you every single day, Grace. Just like your mommy and daddy choose to be a family every single day. And we choose to be with you too, Grandpa." "That's right, sweetheart. Family isn't something that just happens, it's something you choose every day." Sarah was listening to this conversation, and I could see that she was thinking about something. That evening, after the children were in bed, she came to talk to me. "Dad, I want to tell you something I've never told you before." "What is it?" "When I was married to David, when I was living in that big house with all those expensive things, I was lonely, really, truly lonely." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was too proud. Because I thought admitting I was lonely would mean admitting that I'd made a mistake." She sat down next to me. "Dad, do you know when I stopped being lonely?" "When?" "The day I moved back into this house with you. The day I came home." "Sarah, you were going through a hard time. Of course you felt better when you had support." "No, Dad, it wasn't just about support. It was about belonging. It was about being in a place where I was loved for who I really was, not for who I was pretending to be." She looked around the living room, at the simple furniture, at the family pictures, at the life we'd built together. "Dad, this house, this life, this family we've created together, it's everything I was looking for when I was chasing money and status. I just didn't know it then. And now you do. Now I do. And I want to make sure Grace and Robert never forget it." As the years passed, our family continued to grow and thrive. Grace started school and excelled, not just academically but socially. Her teachers always commented on how polite and respectful she was, how she helped other children, how she seemed to understand that kindness was more important than being the smartest or the most popular. Robert grew into a curious, energetic little boy who loved working in the garden with me, who asked endless questions about how things worked, who seemed to have inherited the family love of building things with his hands. Sarah and Tom both advanced in their careers, but they never let work become more important than family. They made sure to be home for dinner every night, to be present for school events, to prioritize time together over money or advancement. And I continued to be amazed by the wisdom Sarah showed as a mother. She had learned from her own mistakes, and she was determined not to repeat them with her children. One evening, when Grace was 7 and Robert was 3, something happened that reminded me of how much Sarah had truly changed. Grace came home from school upset because one of her classmates had made fun of our house. The child had said that Grace's family was poor because they lived in an old house with their grandfather. Grace was confused and hurt. She came to Sarah in tears. "Mommy, Emma said we're poor because Grandpa lives with us and because our house is old. Are we poor?" I held my breath, waiting to see how Sarah would handle this. This was exactly the kind of situation that had started Sarah's own journey away from family values. Sarah sat Grace down and looked her in the eyes. "Grace, let me ask you something. Do you have food to eat every day?" "Yes." "Do you have a warm bed to sleep in?" "Yes." "Do you have people who love you and take care of you?" "Yes." "Do you have toys to play with and books to read?" "Yes." Then you're not poor, Grace. You're rich. You're rich in all the ways that matter. Grace thought about this. But Emma says rich people live in big new houses and don't live with their grandparents. Grace, some people think being rich means having lots of money and big houses. But real richness is having people who love you. Real richness is having a family that chooses to be together. Sarah pulled Grace onto her lap. Grace, Grandpa doesn't live with us because we're poor. Grandpa lives with us because we love each other and we want to be together. That makes us the richest family I know. So Emma is wrong? Emma doesn't understand what real wealth is. But that's okay. Maybe someday she'll learn. Should I tell her she's wrong? No, Grace. You should just keep being grateful for what you have. You should keep loving your family and understanding that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. That night, Grace came to me before bedtime. Grandpa, I'm glad you live with us. I'm glad too, Grace. Grandpa, are we really rich? Grace, we're the richest family I know. Because we love each other. Because we love each other. And because we know that love is more important than money. Grace hugged me tight. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, sweetheart. After Grace went to bed, Sarah came to talk to me. Dad, did you hear what happened at school today? I heard, and I heard how you handled it. I'm proud of you, Sarah. Dad, when I was Grace's age, if someone had said our family was poor, I would have been embarrassed. I would have started wanting things we didn't have. But Grace isn't embarrassed. No, she's not. Because Tom and I have taught her what you tried to teach me. We've taught her that family is more valuable than money. Sarah sat down next to me. Dad, do you know what I realized today? What? I realized that I've broken the cycle. I've stopped the pattern of valuing money over family. Grace will never go through what I went through because she's learning the right values from the beginning. Sarah, that's the greatest gift you could give your children. It's the greatest gift you gave me, Dad. It just took me a while to unwrap it. When Grace was 8, she asked me to help her with a school project about family history. She wanted to know about her grandmother, about how I met Sarah's mother, about the early days of our family. As we worked on the project together, looking through old photo albums and talking about the past, Grace asked me a question that made me think. Grandpa, were you sad when Grandma died? Very sad, Grace. Losing someone you love is the hardest thing in the world. But you didn't give up, did you? No, I didn't give up. I had your mommy to take care of, and I knew that Grandma would want me to keep going. And then Mommy grew up and moved away, and you were alone again. Yes, for a while. But then she came back, and now we're all together. That's right, Grace. Grace thought about this for a moment. Grandpa, do you think Grandma would be happy about our family now? The question brought tears to my eyes. Grace, I think Grandma would be very happy. I think she'd be proud of the woman your mommy became, and proud of the children you and Robert are becoming. Because we love each other? Because we love each other, and because we take care of each other, and because we understand what's really important in life. Grace finished her project and presented it to her class. Sarah and Tom went to watch, and they told me later that Grace had spoken with such pride about our family, about the values we shared, about the love that held us together. Dad, Sarah said, listening to Grace talk about our family, I realized something. She's not embarrassed by us, she's proud of us, she's proud to live with her grandfather, proud of our simple house, proud of our values. That's because you've taught her the right things, Sarah. We've taught her the right things, Dad. All of us together. As Grace and Robert continued to grow, I watched them develop into remarkable children. They were kind, respectful, hard-working, and grateful. They understood that family came first, that love was more important than money, that character mattered more than status. When Grace was 10, she came to me with a problem. One of her friends had invited her to a sleepover, but the friend's family was very wealthy, and Grace was worried that she wouldn't fit in. Grandpa, what if they think I'm weird because I live with you? What if they think our house is too small or too old? Grace, do you think our house is too small or too old? No, I love our house. Do you think there's anything wrong with living with me? No, I love living with you. Then why do you care what other people think? Grace thought about this. I guess I don't want to be different. Grace, being different isn't bad if you're different in good ways. We're different because we value family. We're different because we understand what's really important. Those are good ways to be different. But what if they don't understand? Then that's their loss, Grace. You can't control what other people think, but you can control how you feel about yourself and your family. Grace went to the sleepover, and when she came home, she was excited to tell us about it. Guess what happened at the sleepover? What? We all asked. The other girls were talking about how they never see their grandparents and how their families are always too busy to spend time together. And I told them about how we eat dinner together every night, and how you tell me stories, Grandpa, and how we work in the garden together. What did they say? They said they wished their families were like ours. They said it sounded really nice to have a grandfather who lived with them and spent time with them. Sarah smiled. So you weren't embarrassed after all? No, Mommy, I was proud. I was proud to tell them about our family. That night, Sarah and I talked about what had happened. Dad, do you see what's happening here? Grace is proud of the same things I was once embarrassed by. She values the same things I once took for granted. That's because you've raised her right, Sarah. We've raised her right, Dad. And she's going to raise her children right too. The cycle is broken. The pattern is changed. When Robert was 5, he started asking questions about why some families live differently than ours. He'd noticed that some of his friends lived in bigger houses, had more toys, went on expensive vacations. One day, he asked me directly, Grandpa, why don't we have as much money as Tommy's family? I thought carefully about how to answer. Robert, we have enough money for everything we need. We have food, clothes, a house, toys, books. What more do we need? But Tommy's family has a swimming pool and a big car, and they go to Disney World every year. Those are nice things, Robert. But are they necessary things? Robert thought about it. No, I guess not. Robert, let me ask you something. Are you happy? Yes. Do you feel loved? Yes. Do you have fun with your family? Yes. Then you have everything that really matters. Swimming pools and big cars and expensive vacations are extras. They're nice to have, but they're not necessary for happiness. So we're happy without them? We're happy because we have each other, Robert. We're happy because we love each other and take care of each other. Robert seemed satisfied with this answer, but a few days later he came to me with another question. Grandpa, if we had more money, would we be happier? This was a deeper question, and I wanted to answer it carefully. Robert, money can make some things easier, but it can't make you happier. Do you know why? Why? Because happiness comes from inside, from the people you love and the way you treat others. Money can't buy love, Robert. Money can't buy family. But wouldn't it be nice to have more stuff? It might be nice for a little while, Robert, but then you'd get used to the stuff, and you'd want even more stuff. That's how some people spend their whole lives, always wanting more, never being satisfied with what they have. That sounds sad. It is sad, Robert. That's why we focus on being grateful for what we have instead of wishing for what we don't have. Robert nodded, and I could see that he was really thinking about what I'd said. That evening at dinner, Robert announced to the family, I'm grateful that we love each other more than we love money. Sarah and Tom looked at each other and smiled. They knew that Robert was learning the same lessons that Grace had learned, the same lessons that Sarah had eventually learned. As the years continued to pass, I watched my grandchildren grow into remarkable young people. Grace became a teenager who was confident, kind, and grounded in strong values. She was popular at school, but not because she tried to impress people with money or status. She was popular because she was genuinely nice to everyone, because she helped others, because she had the kind of character that drew people to her. Robert grew into a thoughtful, curious boy who loved learning and building things. He was fascinated by how things worked, and he spent hours with me in the garage learning to use tools, understanding the satisfaction that comes from creating something with your own hands. When Grace was 16, something happened that tested everything we'd taught her. She was invited to prom by a boy from a very wealthy family. The boy was nice enough, but his family lived in a mansion, drove expensive cars, and had very different values from ours. Grace was excited about the invitation, but she was also worried about the expense. Prom dresses, shoes, hair, makeup, dinner. It all added up to more money than our family typically spent on such things. She came to Sarah and Tom with her concerns. Mom, Dad, I want to go to prom, but I don't want you to spend a lot of money on it. I know we don't have the kind of money that Jake's family has. Sarah and Tom talked to me about it, and we decided to have a family meeting. Grace, Sarah said, we want you to go to prom and have a wonderful time, but we also want to do it in a way that fits with our family's values. What do you mean? We mean we'll find a way to make you look beautiful without spending a fortune. We'll be creative, we'll shop smart, and we'll focus on making sure you have a good time rather than trying to impress people with expensive things." Grace smiled. "I'd like that. I don't want to be the kind of person who needs expensive things to feel good about herself." We ended up having a wonderful time preparing for prom. Sarah and Grace found a beautiful dress at a consignment shop. I taught Grace how to do some simple alterations to make it fit perfectly. Tom helped her practice dancing in the living room. The night of prom, Grace looked absolutely beautiful. But more than that, she looked confident and happy. She wasn't worried about whether her dress was expensive enough or whether she looked as glamorous as the other girls. She was just excited to have fun with her friends. When Jake came to pick her up, he was clearly impressed. Not by expensive clothes or accessories, but by Grace's genuine beauty and confidence. After prom, Grace came home glowing with happiness. "How was it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "It was perfect, Mom. I had such a good time, and I felt beautiful, and I wasn't worried about money or trying to impress anyone. I was just myself." "And how did that feel?" "It felt amazing. It felt free." That night, Grace came to talk to me before bed. "Grandpa, thank you for teaching me that I don't need expensive things to be happy." "You're welcome, Grace, but you learned that lesson yourself." "I learned it because of the way our family lives, because of the values you and Mom and Dad have taught me." "Grace, you're going to face many situations in your life where people will try to convince you that money and status are more important than character and family. What will you do when that happens?" "I'll remember tonight, Grandpa. I'll remember how good it felt to be myself, to be confident in who I am rather than what I have. And if you ever forget, then I'll come home, and you'll remind me." When Grace graduated from high school, she was accepted to several colleges. Some were expensive private schools that would have put our family in debt. Others were more affordable state schools that offered good educations without the financial burden. Grace chose a state school, and when people asked her why, she said simply, "Because I want to get a good education without putting my family in debt. Because I've learned that the value of an education isn't measured by how much it costs." I was so proud of her for making that choice, for understanding that financial responsibility was more important than prestige. As Grace started college and Robert entered high school, I began to think about the legacy I was leaving. Not just the financial legacy, but the legacy of values, of character, of understanding what really matters in life. One evening, as I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah came to join me. "Dad, I want to talk to you about something." "What is it?" "I want to talk about the future, about what happens when you're not here anymore." I knew this conversation would come eventually, but it was still hard to think about. "Sarah, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." "I know, Dad, but we need to talk about this. Tom and I have been discussing it, and we want you to know our plans." "What plans?" "We want to stay in this house, Dad. We want to raise our children here, and we want them to raise their children here. We want this house to stay in our family for generations." I felt tears coming to my eyes. "Sarah, are you sure? This house is old, it's not fancy." "Dad, this house is perfect. It's full of love and memories and history. It's where you and Mom built your life together, where you raised me, where we're raising Grace and Robert. It's where our family learned what really matters. What about when Grace and Robert grow up and want their own places? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but I hope they'll want to stay close, to be part of a multi-generational family like we have now." Sarah took my hand. "Dad, you've given us something more valuable than money. You've given us a way of life, a set of values, an understanding of what family means. We want to preserve that and pass it on." "Sarah, that makes me happier than you can imagine." "Dad, there's something else I want to tell you." "What?" "I want to tell you that I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate what you gave me. I'm sorry I wasted years chasing things that didn't matter." "Sarah, you don't need to apologize anymore. You learned the lessons you needed to learn, and now you're passing them on to your children. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand that the years I spent being embarrassed by this house, by our simple life, by your values, those were the years I was lost. The years I've spent back here with you, these have been the best years of my life." "Mine too, Sarah." "Dad, I want to make you a promise." "What kind of promise?" "I promise that Grace and Robert will never forget the lessons you've taught them. I promise that they'll understand the value of family, the importance of character, the truth that love is more valuable than money. Sarah, you don't need to promise me that. I can see it in them already. And I promise that when they have children of their own, those children will know about their great-grandfather, about the man who built this house with his hands, who worked hard his whole life to provide for his family, who taught us all what really matters. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd spent most of my life, where I'd raised my daughter, where I was now helping to raise my grandchildren. "Dad," Sarah said finally, "do you ever regret the way things happened? Do you ever wish you had given me that loan when I asked for it?" I thought about it carefully. "Sarah, if I had given you that loan, you might never have learned the lessons you needed to learn. You might still be married to David, still chasing money and status, still treating family as less important than success. And Grace and Robert. Grace and Robert might have grown up with very different values. They might have learned to value money over family, just like you did for a while. So you don't regret it? I regret that you had to go through pain to learn those lessons. I regret that our relationship was damaged for a while, but I don't regret helping you become the person you are today. The person I am today is someone who understands that family is everything. Yes, Sarah, and that's the most important lesson anyone can learn. As I sit here now at the age of 72, looking back on everything that's happened, I realize that the hardest decision I ever made was also the best decision I ever made. When I refused to give Sarah that loan, when I let her face the consequences of her choices, I wasn't being cruel. I was being loving in the deepest way possible. I was loving her enough to let her learn, to let her grow, to let her discover what really mattered. And now, watching Grace and Robert grow up with strong values, watching Sarah and Tom build a marriage based on love rather than money, watching our family thrive together in this simple house, I know that everything happened exactly as it should have. Sarah learned that family isn't something you can take for granted. She learned that love is more valuable than money. She learned that the people who truly care about you aren't holding you back. They're holding you up. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes you have to let people fall before they can learn to fly. Grace is now 17, getting ready for her senior year of high school. She's planning to study education in college because she wants to teach children, to help shape young minds to pass on the values that our family has taught her. Robert is 13, a thoughtful teenager who still loves working with his hands, who still asks me questions about life and family and what really matters. Sarah and Tom continue to be wonderful parents and partners, building a life based on love and shared values rather than money and status. And I continue to be grateful every day for this second chance, for this opportunity to see my daughter become the woman I always knew she could be, for this chance to help raise grandchildren who understand what family really means. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have given Sarah the money when she asked for it? Would you have rescued her from the consequences of her choices? Or would you have done what I did and let her learn the hard way that family is the most precious thing you can have? Let me know what part of this story touched your heart and tell me what city you're listening from. Because no matter where you are in the world, no matter what your family situation looks like, remember this. Love sometimes means letting go, and the people who truly belong in your life will always find their way back to you. And remember that the most valuable inheritance you can leave your children isn't money. It's values, it's character, it's the understanding that family is more important than anything else in this world.